Hobgoblins with Gorduz Backstabber are insanely strong, but only for limited time. In this video, I'll show you the best Hobgoblin armies you can run at each stage of the campaign, and exactly when and why they stop working. Because if you keep using them too long, they'll start losing fights you think you should win. And yes, even in the late game, Hobgoblins are still useful, just not in the way you might expect. Gorduz boosts Hobgoblins by a ridiculous degree, turning weak units into a formidable fighting force in the early and mid-game. However, only one army can benefit from his buffs. The best starting army actually depends on which legendary load you choose, the early enemies you will face, and the current campaign phase. There are three best compositions you can choose from the start of the campaign, depending on which legendary load you play. If you play as Astragoth, the best army for Gorduz is mass Hobgoblin Archers. The main enemies of the Disciples of Kashut in the first 20 or so turns are Ogres and Greenskins, both of which have very low armor and leadership early on. This means they will rout or die easily from focused missile fire. Very early, you will also gain access to Ash Storm, which slows down advancing enemies and has perfect synergy with flammable arrows. You should also recruit 3 Overseer Lords to follow your main army and act as tanks in battles. If you start a Drazhoath campaign, it's an entirely different story. Your main early game enemies will be Skaven and High Elves. Skaven have huge numbers, and many of their units wield bronze shields, which negate 35% of incoming arrows. On the other hand, Imric's High Elves not only have fire resistance, which protects them from flammable Hobgoblin arrows, but also archers with longer range. Trying to win a shooting war against superior High Elven archers is asking for trouble. Instead, you have two options. The best one is to go for Sneaky Git's army, which can utilize stealth to approach enemy archers. Their throwing knives are also an amazing early game tool for dealing with dragons and dragon princes. You can also choose to go with mass Hobgoblin cutthroats. Their shields will negate about 1/3 of enemy arrows, and they can overwhelm elves with superior numbers. In my opinion, Sneaky Gits are the better option, as they will serve you better in the wars that will follow after you deal with Imric. Zhatan is actually the best lord for an early Hobgoblin rush because of the landmark in his starting province. Once you reach tier 3, you can build it and reduce upkeep cost of all Hobgoblins. Since Chaos Dwarfs don't have supply lines, Hobgoblins quickly become extremely cheap, allowing you to field more armies. Zhatan benefits the most from a mixed army of Hobgoblin archers with a few cutthroats acting as a shield wall. His starting enemies are Norsca and Katay. Norsca fields mass infantry, mostly with shields, which isn't ideal for archers. However, they also like to recruit Marauder Horsemen, a light cavalry with throwing weapons, which can be very annoying to deal with if you can't catch or shoot them. Archers are very useful here. Katay relies on peasant archers and decent melee units at tier 1. Their armies aren't very dangerous early on, and the biggest threat is actually Miao Ying, against whom archers are the best pick. So, the best early army is archers with few cutthroats if you feel you need them, or you can immediately transition into Chaos Dwarf warriors for a melee line and move quickly into an early gun line. As the first stage of the campaign comes to an end, you should start preparing the best Gorduz composition, which will dominate up until late mid-game. Here you have two best options. The first one is well known to many players, the usual archer spam. With massive buffs from Gorduz and most importantly stock, Hobgoblin archers perform extremely well in a checkerboard formation. If you choose this option, a Hashut Sorcerer is probably the best choice due to Ash Storm. A Fire Sorcerer is also a good option for Kind of Flame, which increases arrow damage. You can also use both in the same army. However, the army composition that worked best for me across multiple campaigns is a mix of Sneaky Gits and Hobgoblin Wolf Riders with bows. While this army won't provide easy victories, it acts as a perfect Swiss army knife that can deal with almost any opponent from turn 20 onwards. 5 or 6 Wolf Riders are enough. Boosted Sneaky Gits can hold their own in melee against most tier 2 and tier 3 infantry, especially if you thin them out first with magic and throwing weapons. Wolf Riders are very fast and have longer range than archers, making them perfect for harassment. More importantly, they are your best answer to units you can't or don't want to fight in melee, such as gyrocopters or slayers. They also have flaming arrows, which can be useful when fighting Kugat or Helmangorst early on. And if you find an isolated unit, they can perform reasonably well in melee when charging. This army is also excellent against Skaven, as it completely negates menace blows, and rattling guns cannot shoot invisible units. An Overseer is the best lord choice, as he significantly reduces Hobgoblin upkeep and provides extra campaign movement range. Any sorcerer can offer value, but metal magic is probably the best option, especially against armor and cavalry. You should also attach a Castellan for additional campaign movement range and flash bomb. The cowardly trait is the best choice as it provides stalk, perfect fit for an already stealth-focused army. Here's a quick showcase of what these two units can do together. In this battle, I faced a strong mid-game dwarf army with multiple trollhammer torpedoes, many slayers, hammerers and ranged units. It wasn't an easy fight and required a lot of micro, but there is no other Hobgoblin army composition that could have won this battle. However, even massively boosted Hobgoblins cannot fight forever. At around turn 60, Hobgoblins become too outscaled to have a meaningful impact in battles. I tested every possible Gorduz composition, and while I did win all battles, I mostly had to rely on heroes and magic. Hobgoblins were only finishing already damaged units, and even that became a struggle against higher tier enemies. Low turn Sea Guard already posed a serious challenge that Sneaky Gits can barely overcome. This battle took place around turn 55, and that's when I first noticed Hobgoblins were no longer strong enough for this stage of the campaign, and I started prioritizing Lightning Strike. I still tried using them into the late game. Around turn 85, Thorak declared war and brought 3 very strong armies. While I won all 3 battles, it wasn't thanks to the Hobgoblins. At this stage, Gorduz dies quickly in prolonged melee, and Sneaky Gits lacked the stats to pose a real threat. Army abilities and magic had to carry the fights. At this point you have 2 options. You can either disband all Hobgoblins and recruit better units, or reorganize this army into a defensive force. Replace Sneaky Gits with archers, keep the Wolf Riders, and use the army only to defend settlements. You can afford this because in the late game, Hobgoblins can become completely free. Wine resource buildings reduce Hobgoblins' upkeep, and with enough of them stacked, their upkeep can be reduced to 0. It's a weak army, but it's free. To summarize, Hobgoblins with Gorduz are an amazing early and mid-game army that can achieve a lot in a campaign, but they fall off hard in the late game. In a previous video I covered deep defense, a tactic you can use even with Hobgoblin archers. If you want to see how to win against overwhelming numbers, check it out. See ya!